Great. Well, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Adam Ford. I'm an attorney with Baker Jenner up in the northern part of the city. And we're excited to be here to present our latest installment of our Wellness Connections series on behalf of the State Bar's Wellness Committee. Thank you to Parker Poe for hosting us once again. Our other Wellness Connection committee members are here, Liz Frampus in the back and Carrie Moss, who are both awesome, and we're excited to be here with you. And I'm especially excited today to have a discussion with Plamen Rousseff. Plamen is a technology and transactional attorney at Bryan Cave, and he is also a certified coach and breathwork practitioner. And practitioner. I would say terms that he's probably not comfortable with, like expert or guru of breathwork, but he's very wise in all things breathwork, and we're gonna have a great discussion with him today. And so our kind of format is I'm going to kind of play litigator and drill Plamen a little bit with some questions about breathwork. And we'll have a little ping pong back and forth, kind of get some basics out there as information. And then there's going to be, that portion of this session is going to be recorded so that it can be put up on the State Bar website and we can have this for posterity. And then at that point, we will turn the recording off so that we all feel comfortable sharing and discussing our questions and experiences with regard to breathwork. So,
or no experience with
or lack of experience. Well, we all breathe, yes. Right? So
we all breathe, thankfully.
And speaking of which, before we dive in, I think you have a little something you want us to do to maybe get us ready for the discussion.
Yes. So thank you for the kind and generous introduction. Thank you also for the great hosting and facilities, and to welcome us all into this. Let's establish a little bit of connection with our breath. And so to do that, I invite us all to, we'll do an exercise that is known as breath awareness or awareness of breath in mindfulness circles. It doesn't matter whether you've done it, you haven't done it. It doesn't matter whether you hear about it for the first time, because I have adapted it somewhat to us as lawyers. So we'll take a couple of extra steps so that connecting with our breath becomes a little bit more accessible, given some of the extra baggage that we've picked along the way in our training and practice. And so let's begin by actually firmly planting our feet on the ground, or whatever it is that your feet can reach. And even like press into your feet a little bit. Just notice the sensation on the bottoms of the feet, maybe wiggle your toes a little bit. And then notice how pressing down onto the ground engages your muscles, maybe in the thighs, maybe you feel it in the knees, maybe in the calves, maybe all the way to the lower back. Now gently invite your spine to be upright without getting stiff, without getting just very rigid. Just kind of coax it gently to be a little bit upright. And only now notice your breath. We've been breathing all along this time, but only now we might be actually able to notice our breath as we're more supported and more present in the bodies. At this point, if you feel more comfortable, please feel free to lower your gaze, maybe close your eyes. In any event, just choose a soft focus on something that will not be distracting to you, so you can turn inward a little bit. And now that you've noticed your breath, just begin to follow it with your attention without changing your breath in any way at all. Now it's possible that your breath changed as soon as you turned attention to it. So no worries, Just follow it as it is. And just follow your inhale and your exhale with your attention. Noticing how the breath moves in and out. And when you get distracted, just count it down. Just return to noticing your breath. Following your exhale. If you find it difficult to stay related to your breath, no worries. That's exactly what happens. It might be helpful to focus on the physical sensations of the breath. Maybe the way it gently moves your body, chest rising, maybe a belly expanding. If you wish, put a hand on your belly or on your chest, if that might help. Might help to focus your attention on the coolness of your breath as you inhale and the warmth of your breath as you exhale, wherever you feel that. Or any other physical sensation that it is. Just track that and gently allow yourself to breathe and keep your attention connected to your breath. If helpful, you may choose to focus your attention on the sound of your breath, however quiet and subtle and internal that may be. Or maybe simply note with your mind, inhale, exhale, breathing, breathing. Or maybe you're a visual person and it might be helpful to imagine the inhale is a wave coming in, the exhale is a wave going out into the ocean. I'll let you focus on whatever feels right for the next 60 or so seconds. I'll stop talking. And whenever you feel like, just take the next 3 breaths at your own pace to gently return your focus to the room. Eventually opening your eyes or shifting your gaze to be more open. Maybe pressing again into those feet. And checking in to see what effect this little connection with the breath may have. So welcome. And once again, in our own bodies and in our own breaths, together with our minds, which is usually the main thing present. Now, perhaps the rest of us is here as well, which is very helpful. If someone all of a sudden feels particularly asleep, let me know, and we'll have to do a little bit of waking up. We can take care of that with another breath, but maybe we'll be able to wake you up with our conversation next. So thank you for engaging in this.
Yeah, thanks, Flamen. That was a great way to get started after, for me, after a long couple of days back to back. So breath work. I mean, before we get into what breath work is, how did you get into breath work? What was your, how did you get interested in it? What was your foray into the world of breath work?
Well, initially I knew nothing about breath work, and I actually had a very chance encounter with breath work in my third year of law school, when a very good friend of mine, who at that time, much to my delight, was going through massage school, so I could be her, test subject. She said, "Oh, you're so tight. You need some additional help." I'm like, "Yep, that's right." So she recommended that I check out a type of yoga that was a very gentle type of yoga that used a lot of supports, blankets, blocks, all of that kind of stuff, known as Svarupa yoga. And then I went to one class. I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is so nice, so helpful, so rejuvenating." And you can imagine, third year of law school, accumulation of stress. I think I was like a tight ball of nerves and just muscles that were tight all the time. And I'm like, this can be really helpful. And during one of those classes, they introduced a type of breathing known as Ujjayi breathing, also known as ocean breath or victorious breath. And I really liked that. I just really noticed in the class, I liked it. I liked the effect it had on me. And I'm like, this is a very sweet little practice. And then we continued to use that breath in the yoga class. They taught us a few other ones, but for some reason, I really gravitated toward the ocean breath. And I started using it every time I could think of. I just noticed it helped me relax. It helped me calm my mind. I started using it in preparation for classes, especially the classes with professors who stress me out the most. And we all have those professors. They're just, fantastic teachers, but I'm terrified. And so before those classes, as I was reviewing, I would do this breath. One of the benefits of this breath is that it's completely invisible to everyone else, but it's very powerful on the inside. At one point, we'll actually do the Ujjayi breath, so you know what I'm talking about. And if you know it already, you know what I'm talking about. The thing is, with this breath, it really kind of sort of like it wormed its way into my life. I just started using it anytime I felt stressed, I felt I needed a little bit of support. I'm just like, do it. And it was a secret breath. It was great. So much so that by the time I was actually facing the bar exam, I noticed the night before the first day of the bar exam, I was, again, just stressed out of my mind. And I lay down in bed, I had done all the studying that I could do. I can't study anymore, I'm done. I lay down and I noticed my mind is just like going 1,000 miles an hour. I'm like, there's no chance I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. What am I gonna do? It's bad. I need to get some rest. Tomorrow's the big day, big exam, important stuff. I'm like, oh, let's do the breath. And so I actually ended up breathing this way for the entire night. I did not fall asleep. I couldn't fall asleep. I was so wound up. But I ended up breathing in this way for the entire night. And I noticed at one point, my muscles relaxed. I just got more into like a softer, easy flow of breath in and out, in and out. my mind calmed down somewhat. As I said, I did not fall asleep, but I was incredibly astonished when I opened my eyes in the morning. I was refreshed. I felt so refreshed and so rested as if I had actually slept. I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. I'm very grateful that I stumbled upon this breath and that it helped me on this day. I had really steady energy throughout the day. I was able to, oh, and of course I would do it like on my drive there, you know, as I was sitting and waiting for the exam to begin in breaks, like, all the time. And then it helped me perform, I thought, reasonably well. I was reasonably confident in my answers, and I thought, this is the best as I can do. By the end of that day, I was so exhausted. I had no trouble at all falling asleep. So I didn't have to do it a second night, but I already knew that I had that little secret tool to help if I needed to. So this was the first incredible testament to using a simple breath for a long time. It helped me a lot. Then when I started practicing, and I started at Alston & Bird as a commercial lending attorney. Super transactional practice, super intense, very document intensive. And at one point, like maybe my second or third month, lo and behold, here I am closing a deal with like thousands of papers and documents and signatures and jurisdictions and whatnot and liens and all the crazy stuff you can imagine. I'm like, I have never done such a thing before. The closing stretches into the night. I'm like, okay, gotta breathe again. Breathing, breathing, breathing. And it's very interesting. By that point, I had developed such a curious way of integrating the breathing into my life that I noticed that I could just do the breath. Nobody knew what I was doing. And there was a part of me that was totally following the breath, but another part of me could stay very focused on what I had to do with my hands, with my mind, all that kind of stuff. And so we did the closing, we finished the closing. I have no idea how, because honestly, it was a complete blur. It was like some mystery that this thing happened. I'm very grateful to the incredible paralegal who was very, very experienced, and she was right next to me all night long. And when we're done, she looked at me and she said, wow, congratulations. Have you never really done this before? You did this with incredible poise and grace. I'm like, what? Poise, grace? What are you talking about? It doesn't feel like that to me. It was such a nightmare. It was such a difficult experience. But somehow, what I experienced as incredible turmoil on the inside looked very different on the outside. So that was another curious feedback that I received. I'm like, wow, there's something to this stuff. And then things got even more interesting during the first year, and right after I graduated from law school, and in my summer, basically the summer between law school and beginning legal practice, I started a program, a weekend program, one long weekend per month, called Personal Transformation Intensive. I knew that law school had created such incredible burden on me that it was essentially like very powerful group therapy that we did at a retreat center in the North Georgia mountains. And that took place over 5 months. And I knew that was part of, taking care of myself, important kind of like preparing myself for practice, really finding new sources of stability, new sources of strength in me. And during one of those weekends, we ended up doing a much different type of breath work known as holotropic breath work. Now, the holotropic breathwork is a continuous, like 2 or 3 hours breathing pattern that you maintain with very loud music. It's very tribal. There's lots of rhythm in it. It's a really strong, very powerful experience. And it's like, it almost feels like the breathwork like shoots cannonballs into a fortress. And that was very appropriate because I felt like a fortress at that time. There were so many layers of protection that I had built, that it was only something as intense as that breath work that could begin to create some cracks into that monolithic structure. And so at the end of that breathwork session, I have, again, no idea what happened because it was really very powerful on a physical, on an emotional level. There were even some transcendental moments that I cannot even put in words or remember very well anymore, but I knew it was something that shifted things very deeply. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, this very interesting, very curious stuff. As a result of that breath work, I found incredible new openness for me to be able to even like draw on resources that I didn't even realize that I had within me. I'm like, wow, this is very, very helpful stuff. So I continued practicing law and continued maintaining these practices as much as I could. But that's it. These were like the initial experiences and the initial types of breathing and breath work that I experienced.
So in full disclosure, I've actually known Plowman for a very long time.
From that first law firm.
From when he was at Alston and Bird, right. I came in as a wee little case clerk before I went to law school and worked in his practice group. And I can attest to the crazy closings. But I've had the pleasure of knowing him for a long time. And I'm going to fast forward and tell you a little bit about briefly my experience with this. I remember it was around New Year's 2018, so the end of 2017. I had been meditating and I was looking to kind of step up my practice and get something more out of it. And I was looking at various opportunities around the city. And then I remembered that Plowman had been inviting me to these breathwork workshops for years, and I had just never gone. And at that time, Plowman had gotten certified and was now leading these practice sessions for the soulful breathwork. And I thought, well, I'll go give this a try. And the soulful breathwork practice, I'm probably not going to do it justice, but in my experience, it was more the last kind of practice you talked about, where there's music and it's a deep breathing experience over a long period of time. And the sessions you led were about an hour and a half or so. And we'd lay there, you bring a yoga mat, lots of blankets, and just doing this very deep guttural breathing for a long period of time. Occasionally you would have your friends come in to do the sound bath concerts, yes, which were added a different element to the experience. And I began going to these regularly. You would have them monthly, and I would go to all of them that I could, and had some pretty intense experiences with them. I found that they, like you said, you started chipping away at the armor. For me, I kind of felt like it released some things that I'd been carrying around for a while. Like maybe past emotional traumas that I had just kind of like buried down instead of dealing with. And my body still remembered them. And I just found that going through these breathwork sessions allowed me to really release those and get them out of my system. And I always would come away much more refreshed. And really enjoyed them until the beginning of 2020, where suddenly getting into a room with a lot of people and breathing for an hour and a half did not sound like a great idea. But
not safe anymore.
but that was my introduction to it and what I got out of it. So you've touched on it a little bit, but let's take a step back and kind of look at what is breathwork? How would you define a breathwork and a breathwork practice?
So before I answer this, yes, actually, let me please open this. If at any point you want to add in a question, please interrupt us. That's what makes it more fun and more alive. So please. So I would define breath work as any form of structured breathing, meaning any breathing that we're doing consciously rather than the automatic breathing that we're doing on our own. And it can be as simple as breathing to which we bring awareness, the way we started our meeting today. Or it could be breathing that engages a certain pattern of inhale, exhale. It could include a pause between inhale and exhale. And it can begin to play with like different frequencies of inhale and exhale. But any way in which we consciously breathe and we change the breath, or at least we actively pay attention to the breath, I would describe as breath work. So there is a very wide range of practices and very wide range of ways to experience breath work. And I believe all of them are valid. And I'm grateful there are so many different types and forms of breath work, because all of them are access points to something that can be profoundly personal and even intimate to each one of us. Each one of us is the result of all of our unique experiences. And what works for each one of us, again, will be unique. There is no single path. There is no approved, this is the approved and best way to breathe. That's complete nonsense. There's some principles that through a lot of observation and through thousands of years of practice have been established about what is optimal breathing. But maybe we can touch on some of that later. So that's how I would describe breathing. And that's helpful for us to know, especially for us to know as lawyers, because definitions is where we start. How do we understand the world? Through definitions. So that's one way of making breath work a bit more accessible to our lawyerly minds.
So I have a theory, yes, about breath, because I've noticed about why maybe breath work works. I've noticed in my life that there seems to be a connection with my breathing patterns and my state of mind. So if I'm maybe nervous or scared, I will breathe more quickly, just naturally. Or if I'm really relaxed, I'll breathe more slowly, naturally, without really even thinking about it. What are those physiological effects? What is the relationship between my mind and my breath?
Great, thank you for bringing this up. It's not only states of mind, but also emotional states. So actually an open invitation to all of us. Next time we are in the middle of feeling angry or anxious or sad, if you remember, it will be fascinating to notice what is your breath like at that moment. So we begin to gather our very own data and we begin to see how these things correlate. But based on my experience and based on like studies and working with people, the breath is one of those functions that we can do, as I already mentioned, completely automatically, or we can also do it fully consciously. In both circumstances, breath is the only thing that we can actually control and which can have a direct and immediate impact on the nervous system. Through this connection between breath and the nervous system, we can begin to experience this back and forth relationship between emotional states that are processed through the nervous system and our ability to respond or process those emotional states differently with the support of breath. In fact, inhales, so when we breathe automatically, the autonomic nervous system is engaged. Basically, that part of the nervous system that keeps working no matter what, just to keep us alive. There is also the parasympathetic and the sympathetic parts of the nervous system. The sympathetic part of the nervous system is probably where most of us reside most of the time. This is the part of the nervous system that gets activated when we feel threatened, when we feel activated in some way. It is basically the freeze, fight, flight part of the nervous system, which sadly is is our day-to-day life as lawyers. The other part of the nervous system, the parasympathetic one, is also known as the rest and digest. That's the part of the part of the nervous system which we need to plug into to be able to sleep well at night and stay asleep. This is the part of the nervous system that also becomes activated when we have been, on vacation, an unplugged vacation, if that's even possible, for at least 3 or 4 days. And then you notice all of a sudden when you go to the beach, wow, everything is brighter and you can feel the breeze and you can hear the ocean, and there are all these sensations that become all much more accessible. This is when the parasympathetic nervous system may become more dominant. So an inhale activates the sympathetic nervous system. An exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So the connection is really as immediate as that. And also, as we engage in different patterns of breath, we can either activate one or the other branch of the nervous system. Certain very active breaths we can use to wake ourselves up without coffee, amazingly, or sugar. Certain breaths we can use to calm ourselves down. And you can begin to guess that if we're able to extend our exhale as much as possible, we will be feeding or plugging into the parasympathetic nervous system. It's not quite as simple and straightforward and black and white as I would like it to be. There's a little bit more complexity to that. So I cannot say that if I only focus on the inhale, that will only, create the activation. Yes, but it's a bit more nuanced. But hopefully we'll be able to play a little bit more with that as we move into the evening. So what would you say, now having heard that, how does that make sense from your own experience?
It makes sense. I mean, if breath can be an expression of our mental state, then it makes sense that if we control our breath, that we can then have an influence on our mental state.
And emotional.
It kind of goes back and forth, and emotional.
Yes.
Back and forth. And I've also heard that it has, in addition to our nervous system, when you say, we can go, a couple of days without food, we can go a day or so without water. We can't go very long at all without breathing, which, breathing is fundamental, to everything that we do. And so I think it really has an impact on all kinds of things, and also our circulatory system, because our lungs are so close to our heart. So as we expand, our heart's expanding, and that changes the rhythm of our heartbeat. So I've used breath for myself, like if I'm nervous, to use that pattern to tap into the nervous system and the circulatory system to bring my heart rate under control. Like if I am about to get my blood pressure checked by my doctor, I will maybe take a couple of breaths to do that. So let's kind of get into it a little more. What are some kind of like breathwork 101 practices that we can do?
So if we are, all right, let me think. Maybe I can do a little survey and we can do the next breath practice together, if you're game for that, and see what might be most helpful. So for us as lawyers, my observation is that we tend to be like really stretched, really stressed out most of the time. Does that resonate? Yeah, okay. So would it be helpful to, also the other thing is our main, tool of the trade is right here in the brain, in the head. So often we might be living exclusively in our heads to the detriment of the rest of this physical body. Some examples: we may have become so involved in what we're doing, whether it's a document, whether it's, like whatever it is, our legal task of the day, that we forgot to eat. How many of us have done that? How many of us have not even gone to the bathroom when we really, really need to go? I'm like, yep. Seriously. So,
this I'll say, I promise you, throughout the day, I've noticed myself, I'm not breathing.
Exactly. Thank you for mentioning
so
that.
I'm like, wait, I've not been breathing the last 30 seconds, minute.
Yes. All right. So there's something that has even been named email apnea, because what happens is that emails can be so stressful, so distressing, that when we receive one of those emails, while we're reading it, we're not breathing. So the interesting thing that happens when we stop breathing, well, first, it's an indication of some level of shock. There's some threat that happens. The other thing, as Adam pointed out very clearly and very eloquently, there is a one-to-one connection between breath and life. If we don't breathe, we do not live. Therefore, if we try to minimize breath and how life changes our breath, especially when we stop breathing, what we begin to do is we begin to push away the experience that life is bringing up in the moment. It is the unpleasantness of that email, all the association that we have with the writers, with the writer of the email, all the anticipation of, oh my God, what I have to do after I read this email, or even the first, sentence of the email just sends us into some sort of like a spin. So we hold our breath. And guess what? This is the worst thing we can do for our tool of the trade, the brain, because this big, juicy, meaty organ needs a lot of oxygen to function well. And so we deplete our brains by even subconsciously holding the breath. So next time, again, this happens, no judging, no self-beating, please, no self-criticism, because that's another thing we have perfected, starting from law school throughout practice. Just notice, oh my God, I stopped breathing. Email apnea. Just remember, simply take your breath in. And the other time when it's great to experiment with that is in the dental chair. Because that's the other time when we hold our breath. But the interesting thing is, the more we hold a breath, the more painful the thing is. If you notice, if you're actually breathing through the drilling of the tooth, it doesn't hurt as much. It's fascinating. I've tested it. I've noticed it many times. And I'm like, okay, so another invitation, play with that. Try that next time. So all of this little intro, I'm mentioning all of these things so I can have as many examples for us, so that hopefully next time one of those things happens in our day, we'll remember just to all right, let's see if I can breathe through this. We've heard it so many times. These are some of the many ways we can begin practicing that. So there is a form of breath known as alternate nostril breathing, and you may have heard of it. It is particularly helpful to begin to kind of calm down the big storm of thoughts that happen right here. It is very helpful when we need to actually balance. It balances the nervous system because it is a very even breath. But the other thing it does is it rebalances the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. Again, being so analytical, we tend to be primarily in the left brain, right? That's the one that does all the the logical stuff. And it can be tremendously helpful to activate the right part of the brain, especially when we're confronted with a difficult situation, because that's where solutions that may be unusual, that we haven't thought of, become accessible. So if we feel like very ungrounded, if we feel very scattered in our mind, we can do this alternate nostril breathing. And the way to do it is very simple. We're going to use our hands for that.
I was wondering.
Yes, we need a little physical help. Apparently there are yogis very well trained who can plug their nostrils from the back of their throat. Somehow, I don't know how that happens, but we're not there. So let's use our fingers, please. And we're going to use it very simply. So just using the fingers of your dominant hand, we will be placing the thumb on the right nostril, and then any other finger. It could be, the index finger. It could be, the middle finger. It could be like. If you're left-handed, reverse these instructions.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So reverse what I just said. Yes. All right. And actually, don't even start to do it just yet. So what we'll do is we will inhale through one of the nostrils. We will start on the left. We will then switch which nostril is plugged, and we will exhale through the right. So let me do it a couple of times so you don't have to figure it out and you don't have to guess. And then you just join me whenever it makes sense, whenever you feel comfortable with that. All right. So usually we just begin with like a simple inhale and exhale, and then so what we're doing is we're beginning with an inhale on the left, plugging the right nostril with the thumb. At the top of the breath, we put the other finger and we exhale through the right. And then at the end of the breath, we inhale through the right, plug the nose with the thumb, exhale through the left, inhale through the left, release, exhale through the right, inhale through the right, release, exhale through the left, inhale through the left, release. If your nose is congested, that'll be a little difficult, so don't force it. And I'm going to stop and let you play with that for a little bit. And let's do that just for a couple of minutes. Close your eyes so you're not distracted. So you can begin to have a taste of what that feels like and what it does.
Yeah, I was having a hard time because my my right nostril is a little stopped up. So
That's okay, don't force it.
sounds,
You will not be able
sounds
to do it
lovely.
right
As
now. There'll be another one we'll do later. So if that applies to anyone else, there's no need to force, it won't work. Try to keep the inhale and exhale as even as possible. No worries if they're not. Give yourself another few moments to breathe through both nostrils. Now noticing whether the breath might feel a little bit different, that the air is coming in through both nostrils at the same time. All right, any observations? A little dizziness?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some more oxygen that went to that brain of ours. Does your mind feel a little bit calmer? Maybe not yet. That's fine.
The first one we did started that more so.
Mm-hmm. More so, yes.
Calm since we did that.
So it's really helpful for each one of us to notice which breath works in what way, because there are no universal prescriptions. It doesn't matter what the books say. We have to rely on our own experience and see what happens. And then we know how to use each breath and what to do with it. So that's my invitation about that. So because we even the inhale and exhale, remember, inhale activates sympathetic, exhale activates parasympathetic. We balance these two branches. If we wanted to activate the parasympathetic a little bit more, we will gently begin to extend the exhale. It takes some practice, so just be patient, try it a few times. So if we inhale to the count of 4, we'll exhale to the count of 6, or maybe ideally even to the count of 8. And believe it or not, you might be able to fall asleep if you're doing this, but it might take, like 5 minutes, it might take 10 minutes. But eventually the parasympathetic system will be supported enough and will kick in sufficiently to get us into sleep. So that is one example of a practice that we could do as lawyers when we're like, oh, spinning up here. After this, I'll provide instructions to this, so this will be available to everyone who signed up, and I guess it'll get posted however we're posted as well. Yeah. And I'll also invite you to do your own research. Just search for alternate nostril breath. A little note, you might also notice, you might see it called Nadi Shodhana or Nadi Shodhan, or Anuloma Vilom or Anuloma Viloma. Careful with these two terms. They come from pranayama, yogic practice. There seems to be a lot of confusion about what each of the terms means. I noticed that, and I went into this like big rabbit hole because some people say, basically different websites describe these two practices as each other. So it's a bit of a confusion. So any searches focus on alternate nostril breathing using the Western terminology, and it'll be a lot more consistent. With a practice that's been around for so many thousands of years, I guess there are many different schools and variations, and some people refer to like the original texts, and they're saying, this is the rightest way to do it, and other people are saying, no, you're wrong, etc. So no need to go into that. Alternate nostril breath, for us as Westerners, is the most helpful way to do that, and get the instructions that might be helpful.
I just briefly, I like doing box breathing. Mm-hmm. I don't know, because so box breathing is, you think of it like a box. You inhale for an even count, 4 or 5, hold it for an even count for that same amount to the top, and then exhale for that amount, and then hold it for that amount. So it makes a little box. Maybe it's just the structure of it as a lawyer that I like. Mm-hmm. so neat and
yes,
symmetrical. But
do you want to lead us to have a taste of it?
Sure. So
are you willing to try that? Okay.
So you can really start wherever, but we'll start with an inhale and a count of 4. And I'll lead you. So you inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Then hold at the top, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. We'll do one more round. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. And then hold, 2, 3, 4. I find that if I am throughout the day, I find that's a really easy, if I find myself kind of getting out of sorts a little bit, that's a great way to kind of reset myself relatively quickly, doing that for just a couple of minutes. And I can do it on my desk, I can do it wherever. And to that end, I think it's really great that breath work is, like you said, it's one of these tools that you can use and nobody knows you're doing it.
That's the plus of the practice you just shared, because this can be a very, discrete practice. The other one, not so discreet. But this one, we can totally do it in secret.
Yeah.
And it can be like a little.
You think about, like, as our, as our wellness committee and especially our wellness connections group, we try to have like our little toolbox of wellness tools. And I really like using sound therapy, sound meditation, but I can't like stop in the middle of an oral argument and go put in my binaural beats or whatever. So it's nice to have this as a because there are a lot of barriers to wellness, and wellness tools sometimes just take some time to set out, and then this is one that there's really little to no barriers.
Absolutely. Yes. So along the lines of really being able to call on a breath practice in the middle of our active legal practice, these are very powerful because they can be secret things nobody needs to know. They don't need to know. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that we are supported and we find this, super source. So that was for me the Ujjayi breath, this ocean and victorious breath. So let's do that next, because it is another like completely internal practice. Nobody needs to know. And it can be very helpful to do it when we're doing any other legal task. Well, not even legal task. This is a breathwork practice that we can actually do while driving.
In traffic.
This is a safe one. Yes, in traffic. So, we don't start screaming or, honking or whatever it is that happens. Especially helpful when we do not have the time to stop and do another breathwork practice. Just like the box breathing. Just can do it in the middle of anything that we remember, like, oh my God, I'm out of sorts. Let's breathe. This breathwork practice helps improve concentration by providing a steady breath and a steady supply of oxygen to the brain. And there's like a sound, a very subtle little sound that can also have a soothing, calming effect on the nervous system and on the mind. And because we're slowing and deepening the breath, that again allows us to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system. So again, I will demonstrate, I'll talk through the breath first, and then we will do it together. So the best way to prepare for this breath is to imagine that we're fogging a mirror with our breath. So as we are fogging the mirror with our breath, we begin to close the mouth and continue breathing in the same way, noticing there is a slight constriction at the back of the throat. So we maintain that slight constriction at the back of the throat with a closed mouth. We continue breathing this way, and we notice also that there is a sound. Now there's more of a sound that the breath is making. So let me demonstrate this. So we begin to gently slow down this you know, we first started with the but as we slow down, we maintain this constriction in the back of the throat so that, yes, it may also sound like Darth Vader. Yes, we got it. But we can also soften the sound as much as we need to. For the sake of this exercise, let's emphasize it and let's make it as loud as possible. And just see what that feels like. So we'll start by imagining that we're fogging a mirror with the breath. Closing the mouth. Maintaining the same constriction. Continuing to slow down the breath. Are you hearing the internal sounds? Raise your hand if yes. And then gently begin to slow down and to even the breath so that the inhale is equal to the exhale and the exhale is equal to the inhale. No pausing. Beginning to create like a circular breath almost. Closing the eyes really helps focus on the sound, the inner sound. It feels a little bit different on the inhale and exhale. You're probably noticing that. If you're a visual person, you can really imagine that those ocean waves coming and going, inhaling, coming in, exhaling, going out into the ocean. If you're an audio or auditory person, just enjoy that sound. Make it as big as you wish. If you're a kinetic person, just notice the physicality of this breath. How it moves your body. And maybe even play with the strength of the sound, making it super strong, making it super quiet, super gentle.
This is a style of breathing that I've encountered with yoga. Yoga instructors will talk about the Ujjayi breath. Is that because because of that it helps you with the oxygenation? It's good for something like yoga.
Yes. By the way, do you notice being a little bit jarred when Adam started speaking?
Sorry.
Yes, that's perfectly normal. You did nothing wrong, but this is really helpful to keep in mind. We need to give ourselves just a little buffer before and after breathing, so that we don't have this like spike. Nothing wrong, just part of cultivating this relationship with our breath. Yes, it is very common in yoga practice because it can help with making more difficult. Well, it helps with focus, but it can also provide inner support for poses that may be more challenging to the body. And because the sound is a continuous sound feedback that we are actually breathing, and we will hear when we stop breathing. In a difficult pose, the tendency is to hold the breath. Again, we have this continuous feedback that reminds us, oh, I stopped breathing. Difficult yoga poses are easier when they're supported by the breath. Often there might be even a syncing between movement and the breath in yoga. And that's another reason why this is done. I have even seen references that this breath can help with endurance, being used, time and time and time again. It can really like create, just like build inner resilience and like physical endurance even. Similarly, we can, if we want to be in a balanced state, even inhale and exhale, like even duration. If we want to use this breath to support sleep, we extend the exhale. It's really fascinating. I noticed that with this many years of practice, now it can take me a really long time to inhale and really long time to exhale. I learned, and through some recent reading and studying, I've noticed that anytime we're able to slow down our breath as much as possible, to even it out, and to make it as quiet and subtle as possible, that tends to calm down the nervous system once again. And a rapid, erratic breath, something like, by the way, if we breathe in a similar breath pattern like this, we can work ourselves into a panic attack. This is the breath pattern that will produce a panic attack within 10 minutes if we keep this up. But any erratic, any irregular breath pattern is like a red flag to the nervous system saying something is wrong, there's danger, freeze, fight, flight, whatever is the appropriate response, or whatever is the habitual response for each one of us. Sympathetic nervous system is full on. Conversely, as much as we are able to sustain steady, simple, quiet, regular breath, it's like sending a signal back to the nervous system saying, I got it, I'm fine. The tiger has passed, it's not going to eat me this time. The boss is not going to fire me this time. I misunderstood what that evil look was from this person of authority that just passed by me. And they didn't even notice me. And we can really help with sustaining a simple, steady, flowing breath in that way. Can be tremendously helpful. It takes time and practice. It takes forgetting many times. And that's just part of the practice. At this point, all of us are very familiar with what practicing means. It means encountering mistakes all the time. Hopefully, we're in an environment where we have sufficient support so that the mistakes are not, the end of our career. Because some of us don't have that luxury. A mistake can be the end of our professional path in a certain legal environment. Sadly, that is part of these structural impediments to wellness. We live in an environment as lawyers where we have to be on guard so much of the time. And that's why it is important to acknowledge that, yes, we can do these individual practices, but what are the ways in which we can begin to contribute to the slow transformation, to the slow change of these structural barriers to wellness that exist in legal practice that have been entrenched for so long? And we maintain a lot of them by habit, by inertia, or by fear, because we're afraid that if we change this, oh my God, I'm not going to make as much money as I need to keep the practice going. Is that true? There might be safe ways to test that assumption and discover alternate models that are not killing us. And so by all of these breathing practices, they can expand our capacity to meet a lot of challenges on a personal level. But they can also expand our capacity to become stronger and more powerful and more creative in the face of this big challenge. How do we begin to transform the profession in a way that it becomes more human and it begins to support us so that we can support our clients? And what if, as lawyers, as we become healthier, how can that even begin to shift the way we heal conflict in society? Lawyers are the healers of conflict. We are the guardians of conflict in society. If we approach conflict from a much more balanced state, from a much more empowered state, I believe this can change the dynamics of how we deal with conflict and how we resolve that. So it can have very deep and very powerful implications. And it can start, small, seemingly insignificantly with the breath. But as we build this up and as we expand the awareness, it can have a very, very major impact. And it can help us with something that we really need. We are like yearning for these changes. I'm noticing a lot of that in the profession right now. All of the work of the Wellness Committee is motivated by that need to find healthier ways for us individually, but also collectively as a profession, because that ultimately allows us to support society in a different way, and we can provide a very different, philosophically different service to people.
Yeah, and that's a great insight. And to that end, I want to have Jay just stop recording here in a moment so we can discuss a little. But before we do that, we've discussed several styles of breathing. Very practically, how would you recommend we implement a breathwork practice, on a day-to-day or weekly basis? How can we get benefit from doing this over a period of time?
Yes, thank you for that. And also remind me if I, for some reason, forget. Actually, let me talk about this first. Safety about breathing practices. So what we did today, these tend to be known as like mindfulness breathing practices. They also draw on the pranayama branch of yoga and pranayama breathing practices. The ones that we did today are safe to do on our own, in most circumstances. Please, careful with driving, especially, like this. Obviously, there are limitations, just reasonable precautions. These short breathing practices can be pretty safe and pretty accessible to all of us, as long as, the nose is not plugged up. But there are some breathing practices that involve the mouth. Any longer breathing practice, meaning those that can last up to an hour, like with soulful breathwork or shamanic breathing or rebirthing or circular connected breathwork or whatever it is. Those are really important to experience in a supported environment. So my recommendation for all the longer breathwork practices is to actually, ideally, visit a class in person, because they're very physical. There is a very deep physicality of these practices that is best experienced in person. If not possible, there are also online versions of those. But definitely, if you do a longer breathwork practice, do it with someone who can explain it and can create a safe enough environment for each one of us. And that is profoundly subjective. Different people will feel safe in the presence of different instructors. And that's part of our own judgment and discernment. That is important to do. Breathwork can reach even on the level of deep trauma that we have buried. Some trauma we may not be even aware of. Some we may have experienced even in a pre-verbal state. And so if breath work touches on that. It does that so that it begins to release it and to facilitate some sort of healing, some sort of like support for that. But it is important for that to happen in the support of someone who knows what to do in those circumstances. This deeper stuff usually happens with the long practices. So there are some shorter practices that might involve breath retention, breath holding. These might also be trickier or less safe to practice on our own until we become comfortable with that. You may have heard of the Wim Hof method. Wim Hof is also known as the Iceman. He's a Dutchman, profoundly charismatic. He combines a certain very, very intense, very active form of breathing with exposure to cold, which are fantastic ways to strengthen the nervous system. But any breath retention is important to do, again, in supervision until we become, breath retention means holding the breath, sorry. Holding the breath for any period of time. That's important to do with supervision. And the other thing, if anyone has certain health concerns or certain health issues, usually associated with high blood pressure, anything to do with heart, lung conditions, any psychiatric condition, it is important to check with your health provider, the doctor who supports you for that condition, before engaging in any of those breath works. So if there are none of those complications, we can really do all of these simple practices. How to do it? If any of those practices that we did tonight resonates, you liked it, just keep doing it for the next week, 2, 3, and see how it helps you. You can, anytime you remember to do it is a good time to do it. Once a day, fantastic. 0 times a day, fine. I'll remember tomorrow and I'll do it tomorrow. Okay, 3 times a week, okay, no problem. But this is how to basically play with that and create our own relationship with each one of those breath practices. Now there are more and more resources, books. Recently, I read a book called Breath. Oh, by the way, there is a fantastic TED talk by someone called Lucas Rockwood, Change Your Breath, Change Your Life. He talks about 3 breath types, and he's super funny and makes them incredibly accessible. So these are different ways just to see different types of breaths done by different people online. Give it a try. All of those things would often have some sort of safety instruction. Just follow the guidelines that they offer, and always use your own judgment. If for some reason something feels unsafe, and I'm making the distinction between unsafe and uncomfortable, it's different. Uncomfortable is we're encountering something unfamiliar, and I'm like, okay, I can go there, I just don't know how to do it. Or my inner critic is up and saying, oh, you're not doing it right, you're a failure, blah, blah, blah. That's the thing that we can move through. Anything that feels on a visceral level unsafe, very important to stop and to check with, maybe use your 6. You may have never encountered that before. It could be an indication of underlying trauma or any other underlying issue that just needs professional support. Use your 6, use your EAP, or any other mental health resource or support that you have available. And tell them and share, this is what I encountered. I tried this breath and I was about to get into panic. What's going on? That could be an incredibly helpful way to begin to access something that otherwise we may not have even known about for a very long time.